Hey guys, welcome back to part two, and we're going to continue where we left off at the hero expansion from the core book. The hero expansion is part of the core book, and here we get into the introduction. Just letting you know, hey, welcome back to the system, and hopefully that you guys learn the basic rules now, enough to have played a game and you got a little bit familiar with it. And that's what I mentioned in the previous video part one, that I mentioned that it's best to stop after you've gotten through to page 18 that finishes the first section of the book with the basic rules, so that way you could play a game, get familiar with it, and then the rest of this will kind of feel a little bit easier to learn after that point. You'll be a little more excited about it too, because you'll understand like what it means to actually have superhero stats and whatnot. So the introduction gets you started, gets you introduced to it, to say, hey, welcome back. Getting started pretty much lets you know what this book is about, what you're diving into, what you're going to be doing, which is creating characters who have powers and whatnot. The basics, covering any additional basics onto the basics that the core book had previously mentioned, which is all going to be in the same book. So I just say the core section, in regards to that, are the basic rules. This adds a couple extra basic rules that add on to the hero expansion, like things like double attacks per action, like machine guns, receive damage resistance, because now you're going to be dealing with damage resistance, receive damage resistance for each attack. If a character dual wields the firearms and would double the damage, apply damage resistance first before doubling damage. So things like that, because now you have new set of rules in regards to things like damage reduction and other kind of things like that. So little bit of basics on that, and obviously each power will break down things even further in details. Charts is just letting you know, beginning the chart section, which is part of this chapter. It's going to refer to charts, that the powers, when you get to the power section, are going to refer to the charts on how you actually dissect them and understand what those powers relate to, certain powers that refer to the charts. And here you have the charts, and so pretty much you have strength section here starts off, and you have, I'll try to hold it like this so you can kind of see everything, and what you have here is strength class 1 to 6. Now here, normally when you're just playing the general game, 1 to 6 could just mean you're not so strong, and a 6 being pretty strong. Here, once you go into the hero expansion, you're actually getting a figure for what that means. So I would say that if you're playing the game before hero expansion, a 4 or a 5 or a 6 doesn't have to necessarily mean 400, 500, 600 pounds if you're just playing like a general game. But when you go into the hero expansion, that's what it means. And you can play it as both ways anyway, but here it actually means that, because now we start going into superheroes going into high amounts of lifting capabilities. So human level goes up to 600 pounds. There's a high human level, class 2, class 3, class 4, all the way up to class 8. And there's a reason why this is broken down like this. Essentially, it's based off of an old superhero statistic system that went from 1 to 7. And people might be familiar with it. And this essentially goes off that, because the idea is that that was the only system way back in the days for stats for characters. And this is a way for you to take those same characters, or even if you, when you were younger, maybe if you use that same stat system to make your own characters, because I did the same when I was younger, and use that for making heroes and characters and whatnot in my own kind of universe, I would then be able to translate them over to this system seamlessly. So that is the reason why it's divided in that way. And it just breaks down certain amounts of blocks of numbers within the amount of lifting that would go in that range. So in class 4, you're going up to from 2 tons to 10 tons. So this divides that amongst that. Class 5 is going from that 10-ton range up to 50 tons. So now it divides that amongst the slots that they have there. Energy, it starts at a class 3. Now the reason why is because it gets dissected a little bit later in more detail, but essentially it's so that the class, that there wouldn't be anything relating to a class 2 or a class 1, except class 1 would mean no energy at all. Class 2 would mean physical or touch base, which is a power that gives you like fire skin or some type of offensive energy skin, and that would be the equivalent of a class 2. The reason why we do the class 3 here is because start with class 3 is because we want the class 3 has to equally match around the same strength level as a class 3 in strength, and so on when we go into mental. So that kind of keeps things kind of aligned, and as you play the game, you'll realize why and how that works. So you have mental starting at class 3. A class 1 of mental would be no powers at all. A class 2 of mental would be almost like a sixth sense, which is a separate power unto itself. It's not an offensive thing, but gives you kind of a sixth sense. And then obviously when you get into mental, the power of mental, the same with energy, breaks down to what you're using it for, strength levels of what you're using it, the intensity of what you're using it for, because maybe you are using it to read minds, maybe you're using it to do mind attacks, maybe you're using it to move things around. So it's different, depending on the power that gets attached to it, because mental and energy break down into subcategories. You have fighting, agility, accuracy, all get paid for from the same thing. Class 1, class 2, and they go up by 3s all the way up to 21. Your health chart, class 1 all the way up to class 8 is above 1075. So you're going to have some cosmic characters that might fall into that, and some other characters that are a lot less falling into these classes. And there's going to be a section later on, let me jump back to the table of contents real quick, that is power level glossary, and that's going to be a section that actually breaks down what certain things actually mean. Like, what do these numbers mean in relation to like a character, like being able to say has a health level of class 3. What does that actually mean? And it actually writes it out, including for energy, mental, all these kind of things, fighting. So it gives you a better sense of translating what do these numbers mean. They're not just general numbers, kind of gives you an idea of what they mean. Speed obviously is self-explanatory. Teleport and leap, at that point, is the cutoff for leap, and beyond that is teleporting. And then we jump into powers. Power starts with, you have your main power section, and then you have another section of powers, 2 separate sections divided into. The main powers usually have ranks, and they're usually more powerful and more detailed. These are kind of more your backbone abilities. And the second part is going to be more your basic powers that are very kind of like simple. They may not have ranks that you pay for into them. Essentially, let me just really gloss over the fact that when you do the hero expansion, the game master is going to give you a set of points to pay for powers, and that's how this is done. They all cost a certain amount of points. So maybe starting off, you'll make your character roll for your character, as you've seen earlier in the core book. Make a general character, and then when you get the powers, you just add on to that. So you might say, the game masters might say, I want to give you 10 points to pay for powers, which is not a lot, but standard, I would say, might be something between 20 and 40 powers. So you can kind of really bolster your person up and build them either upwards, or if they want to give a cap in terms of the class level, maybe you'll build them sideways in terms of having a more variety of powers. But maybe they won't go past a certain class level if they don't want the game to be too powerful. So you have these are your main powers here. Strength, you have energy, which drops into a bunch of other sub abilities within that, because you'll have energy blast, you'll have energy shield if you want to pay for that. You're going to have energy / elemental control. So you start to have different subcategories with it, and it starts to get expensive. But just this shows you right here that, from that page and all the way to this page covers a list of different abilities that get tacked on to the energy ability. Same with the mental. It works the same way as the energy ability, where you have a lot of subcategories that you can attach to it. You have fighting, agility, accuracy, and you'll pay 1 point per actual point increase. So, you want +1 in fighting, pay 1 point. 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. But as you go through the class categories, you'll just see kind of where you're at, so that you're not paying for it in class categories, but it just lets you a reference to know where you at in the class category when you refer to the chart. Health, you pay for health if you want, pay for healing. There's healing, which is at the beginning of your turn. Where you get your turn is consisted of 3 actions. At the beginning of your turn is a free action. You get to heal. It is the healing chart, which you'll pay for. It's 2 points per rank. So at the beginning of your round, say if you got 2 ranks of healing, then that means at the beginning of your turn, you'll roll a d4 naturally for free. But if you have energy slash magic healing, that is an active ability that takes an action to do. Now, you can use it on yourself, you can use it on other people, but that is not a free action like your body's healing. So that's the difference between regular healing and the energy slash magic healing. And the energy slash magic healing is the same thing. It's just a way of you determining how you're kind of describing it. Some people might be using it magic based. Some people might be energy based, and you have generate energy abilities or cosmic abilities, and you want to say it like that. So that's all it is. Flight, run, you already saw the chart, so you're just paying for that. Leap and teleport, same difference. Invisibility, shapeshift, pretty much are somewhat similar in abilities, but the thing about it is that invisibility costs a little more because it's actually giving you a lot of bonuses, and you'll be able to read through that. I'm not going to go heavy into that right here, but it's giving you a lot of bonuses in terms of you avoiding hits, and in terms of you actually even being able to hit somebody. It increases your ability to hit somebody because they don't even see you coming. And it tells you all the things that detect invisibility or shapeshift. There's certain powers here that you can get that will detect those things, like enhanced senses, super senses, certain types of sight abilities, certain add-ons to that ability as well. A lot of these powers will have add-ons to them. Growth and shrink, and you can pay for that. You've got health drain, which essentially is something that we're going to get into damage reduction in a moment, but health drain is not something that damage reduction will apply to. But essentially health drain, you're just draining someone's health, and then you're actually adding it to your own health in the form of an attack. So you could do it as close combat, or you can add points to make it a range-based health drain maneuver. It's a very costly power because it's very powerful. And we have a poison tranquilizer, a power that you could pay for that. And you'll be able to read into the description of that. Essentially be, poisoning someone or tranquilizing them, and they'll be knocked out. And the way that works, at the beginning of the round, they either got to roll to break out of poison, or otherwise they'll take damage from the poison. For trank, you got to roll at the beginning of your turn to see if you break out of the tranquilize, or you being knocked out. And if you don't, then you're just knocked out for your entire turn. Someone's able to get free hits on you pretty much. And it breaks down to that you're still able to roll to defend. You're just not going to be able to add your agility, because the idea inside this game, and it mentions at the beginning, is that the D100 is such a large variable. But the reason why is because it's like, for the fun of it and having fun with the game, it's like you could say like random things have happened to change up the chances of something happening that way. Maybe your body's laying there on the floor. I know it might sound silly, but like all of a sudden, like I don't know, a dog comes by and starts like sniffing you, and you roll over and you happen to miss getting hit, or whatever you want to say. But it breaks it down in a more simple way, so it's not trying to get over the top where, so you're knocked out, so you can't do this, you can't do that, whatever the case is. But it's all up to Game Master if he wants to do it like that. Like I said, the whole rule book is very flexible. Poison and tranquilizer resistance. Then we go into damage reduction, which is here is called resistance energy slash physical, or slash mental. And essentially you pay for the ones that you want to have. If you want to pay for all of them, you can do that. It only goes up to damage reduction 5, because we didn't want it to make inside the system where you can get damage reduction 20 or 30 and nothing's hurting you at all. The idea here is you can have damage reduction up to 5, and then we would correlate that with having high health as well. So you would just have a lot of health. So you want to be someone who is, say like somebody like Superman or something like that, who's shrugging off a lot of damage quite easily. You would just make sure your health is very high, probably in the 500 range, along with a high damage reduction towards physical and energy attacks, whatever the case is. Stretch, you have stretch. And that's self-explanatory. Resurrection, you can make it touch base, or you can make it where you have range as well. But essentially, you would be able to resurrect somebody. You have a target mark to make. If you have 1 rank in it, you got to roll a D100 and get a 90. If you have 2 ranks in it, you got to get a 60, and 3 ranks in it, you got to get a 30, which is obviously easier to make. Wish and reality manipulation is pretty much, like I said, when I put them like that as a slash wish and a slash reality, it's essentially a just descriptive way. If you want to say yours is based more on magic, then maybe it's a wish. If it's based on more like energy, reality warping, then that's what it is. Reality warping, matter manipulation, falling into the same category. You essentially can do almost anything, but this power actually requires an additional power. It actually requires the energy stat to make it easier. Otherwise, it's a very hard maneuver to do without energy stat. It's basically near impossible. But essentially, it gives you kind of sway over the rules of the game for the most part to a degree. You can kind of create anything, do whatever you want, and any instant ability inside the power section, you can do it. Any instant ability, so anything that stays or lasts or something like that, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do something like that. Like, for example, ability like precognition, you wouldn't be able to do that because once you roll for a wish or reality manipulation, it's an instant effect. Precognition is a passive ability that well, it's a passive and active ability actually, but essentially, and it's very nice in the way that it plays out, but essentially allows you to run your turn, run your action, depending on the ranks you have in it. You can have up to 3 ranks in it, which you would say for your action, maybe you try to attack somebody. It doesn't go well. You're able to retract that and say, I want to simulate like I didn't do that. But that means you knew what was going to happen, and maybe the roll wasn't good, so you're gonna change up what you're gonna do with that, and now you have the option to like take it back and then redo something else. But you're not taking back in time, like going reversing time. It's simulating like you knew what was going to happen, you saw what was going to happen, you didn't like the outcome, and you decided not to do that. And it kind of breaks it down in the example here, so I'm not going to kind of drag it out, but I think you really enjoy how that power works. It's very unique. Time manipulation, now that is just rewinding back time. In that case, you're just re-rolling a set of dice. It breaks down to how that works. Yeah, it's pretty much just re-rolling and or being able to redo an action similar to precog, but it's a little bit different here. But yes, you can read the instructions on that. Probability control, it works similar to probability control or luck. It works similar to time manipulation, but the only difference is time manipulation, you would roll, and then after you saw what your results were, you could re-roll, including on your defending action. If somebody's attacking you and you roll and you don't like the results, you reverse time and you re-roll, or however you want to say it is. Maybe you sped up time and you were able to, like, whatever you want to, however you want to phrase it, you're playing with time. Probability control, on the other hand, is you roll twice regardless. You got to determine in advance that you're going to use it, and then you re-roll twice and take the better of the roll. So it's just increasing your odds or increasing your luck of the event. So it's a little different in that aspect. Similar, but a little different. And here goes your basic powers, like I mentioned before. These ones usually don't have ranks, and they're pretty simple. So you have Fire Skin, which is a D4. It's always on you. It affects you in terms of you doing melee damage. It gets boosted from your D4, but it also could destroy things on your person, as well as when people hit you, they'll receive a D4 if their hit actually connects. Claws and Spikes is where just pretty much you always having like a weapon on hand. You get D6 weapon damage if you have spikes on you, as opposed to you doing a D4. So it's not a huge bonus, but also that comes into as a utility ability as well, because you got spikes on you, might be able to cut some, or claws, you can cut some. Additional limbs, you can pay for that. X-ray vision, and the game master can add other sorts of vision if they want to as well. This just gives you one example of that, but you can replace that with heat vision and things of that kind of sort too. Enhanced and super senses. One is obviously better than the other, but you can pay for that as well. You got webs, and this breaks down into regular, non-organic and organic webs, and it shows the rules on how that works differently. Freeze is something that can be added to energy power or just close combat touch. But the thing about it is, when you use it as a close combat touch, you're trying to freeze a person, and they actually will be held similar to being held down by the webs. So it's like you're holding somebody and they freeze, so it doesn't do a lot of damage initially. But if you want to attach it to a blast, it can be, but at that point it gets very costly attaching it to a blast. But it wasn't thrown into the energy section because like I said, you might just want to use it for close combat, so it kind of becomes its own separate thing in that regards. Defensive fighting, this is nice for if you have a character who is has a high fighting ability and you don't want to use agility to defend. But the way it works kind of unique here in that defensive fighting only You only cost 1 point, but it's going to allow you to use your fighting stat to defend against melee attacks, but only up to 1 strength class higher than what you're at. So if I ran back to the chart section just to give you an example of that, it's saying that if you are a regular guy and you're in class 1 and you can defend someone who has a class 2 up to someone who has got a class 2 and fighting above you with your fighting stat. Anything more than that and they're too strong, so you can't block a person whose physical strength is so much that they're punching through walls in your regular human strength. So vice versa, the same thing too. If you're in class 3, you can defend up to a class 4 but not a class 5 with your fighting. So that's kind of a way to balance out the fact that you aren't going to have somebody like a regular man in a cape costume defending against some super powered hulking being blocking their hits. Radar, Sixth Sense gives you obviously a heads up warning, giving you a plus to your bonus in defense. And along with another ability that someone's got to roll natural 25 or better before adding any bonuses to even be able to hit you. So it really helps you in that regards. Along with the role-playing power of that, you'll be able to detect certain things like invisibility and whatnot too. So some of these powers will have a bonus of role-playing aspect to it along with stats aspect to it. Super fast perception is very similar to that in terms of some of the bonuses, but you're also, the role-playing aspect of it is that you're able to perceive things that are happening really fast. So if something's like someone's moving really fast in the room, you actually see them while other people can't. And that's a general catch-all for fast. Like if you want to build a speedster archetype, you're going to really make that the basis, and that's not really going to really break down the difference between how fast someone is. So if you're a speedster and you run like 500 miles per hour, or you're a speedster and you run like the speed of light, you would just still pay for that power, and just saying that you're able to perceive things really fast. Energy damage absorption, it breaks that you're able to absorb obviously energy or physical damage. There's energy damage absorption, physical damage absorption, and you're able to absorb that based on your damage reduction. The amount that you reduce in damage is what gets absorbed. And you can read through that. Features is pretty much like a catch-all to say any kind of other power you want to add, you'll pay for this for 1 point, and then you could just make it up. So essentially an example of that would be wall crawling, would be a feature. Underwater breathing, self-sustaining, meaning no oxygen, no food, immortality based on aging, photographic memory, things of that sort. You would just pay for with feature. Or if you want to improve another power, you can use that by paying a feature. For example, maybe you want to be able to say, like, you pay for claws and spikes and you want them to be able to shoot. You add 1 extra point by paying for a feature, and now those things can shoot. Multi-targeting, you add them to things like your energy blast. You'll add it to things like your healing, a resurrection. So multi-target can be added to a lot of different things. Your ability to teleport, you can add multiple targets to that. So this is an ability that stacks on to many other different things, and it breaks down examples of how you do that based on ranks. Because sometimes you maybe don't want to, maybe you want to have a larger quantity of a lower rank. So say if it's a blast and you have energy class 5 of a blast, maybe you want a lot of multiple targets of your class 3 level blast, your weaker blast, as opposed to more targets of your strongest blast, which is your class 5. So there's different ways to kind of chop it down for the same or similar price. Illusions breaks down to, it gets attached to your energy or mental stat, and if it's through your mental stat, you're making illusions in the person's mind, and so they're seeing things based on what you're making them see. If it's attached to the energy stat, then the illusions are holograms, and in that case everyone's seeing them. But of course then resisting it becomes a little different too, versus resisting it mental, and it breaks down how do you resist that. True sight, another detection ability, allows you to see through illusions, allows you to see through invisibility and shapeshifting, and you can determine with the GM of any additional abilities that it has. This just lets you know, feel free to add any other powers that you want, because like I said before, this system is about you adding things to the system as you see fit. Transformation, This is just some miscellaneous rules. It goes into saying the difference between transformation and suit, a couple other miscellaneous rules. So that's something that you'll be able to look through just for some clarification on certain things. Here goes an example right here of a superhero character. So John Doe now with superhero powers gives you a run through of those powers and whatnot that they have, how you would write it up. You'd draw it up similar to this on a sheet of paper, and then this breaks down how it was built and everything like that. So it's a good way for you to understand how a person gets built up, the amount of cost points that went into everything as well, so you get an idea how much it costs. And we're going to dive into this real quick because I'm going to try to stop the video to make a part 3 after we get past the full section of the first core book. So power level glossary, like I mentioned before, is just a breakdown of the details of what each of those stats mean. So energy class, for example, energy class 3, enhanced human, represents energy level discharge equal to a small firearm, and it breaks down each level like that, so it gives you a quantifiable idea of what that means. Some of us who are into things like comics and things of that sort and superhero stuff will already have an idea, but this kind of really helps you out a little bit if you're not familiar with it, or at least let you know where that basis is. And this goes for a few of the stats like mental, health, agility, fighting, accuracy, healing, resistance, damage resistance, and then they also let you know on this page what are the basis standard stats for a regular person. And now you are ready to be a hero. So this right here just concludes the core book with the hero expansion, and just let you know you're ready to jump into the game. And I'm gonna stop there for this section, and we're gonna do a part 3 covering the expansion 2 book.